Oh, David. Hi, David.
All right. Can anyone hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Ah, good. Okay, great. I guess I just couldn't hear you there for a minute. All right, great. So, hello, everyone. Now, who's on the telephone with us today?
Phyllis.
Oh, Phyllis, great. Okay, wonderful.
How do I get on?
Hello, Sylvia.
Oh, hello.
How
I
are
don't,
you?
I don't see you.
You don't see me? I'm
Oh,
right
I
here.
will.
Can you see me now?
No,
Sylvia will stop touching. If you would leave it alone, you would be able to see.
No, I don't.
Just don't
That's
touch it.
not him.
Okay. It's just going to take me a second to do that.
Let him know you can see him.
Can you see me now? I'm sort of, I'm this big lumpy
see
guy.
you.
It's like right in front of the,
No, I see another man.
yeah, that's me. That's
No, it's not you.
That's not going to work at all. Oh my gosh, this crazy room, I tell you. All right. Every time I need to figure this out.
Where are you?
There you are.
All right, we're going to go to plan B. Give me 1 second. We're still figuring this stuff out, but we will eventually figure it all out. All right. That's not any good.
We have two of you now, and you're echoing yourself.
Yes, that is not good. All right. Is that any better?
Yes.
Yes,
Good.
we still have two of you, but you're not echoing yourself.
Exactly. No, you're gonna need to put up with both of me, but it's not going to be nearly as bad.
There
Okay.
you are.
All right. There we go. All right. Hello, everybody.
Hello, I
Hello.
only
Hello,
see.
Dee. Hello, Florence.
Hello.
Hello, David. Hello, Suzanne. Hello, Sylvia. Now you see me.
Yeah,
Yeah, now you see me. Okay. And hello, Ellen. All right. So we'll get started. So this is very nice. Still trying to figure this stuff out, how this stuff works, but we'll get there. Definitely a fair amount of what's the word I'm looking for? Growing pains with this kind of a thing, but we'll get there. All right. So today we're going to read about Gideon, otherwise I think known as Gideon the Wimp. But he grows, and it's very interesting that the Gideon I have found to be a very interesting character. So just for those of you who weren't able to join us last week, I'm going to pull up Judges 6, and we'll just read through it real quick to give everybody. Actually, it wasn't last week. It was a couple of weeks ago. Hello, Connie. It was a couple of weeks ago.
Hi.
Hello. How are you? So I'm going to share this. I'm going to share the screen here. All right. So we're going to go back to Judges 6, which is the beginning of the story of Gideon, and we'll just go through this quickly, so that everyone is on the same page. Because even I felt like I needed to read it again because it had been a couple of weeks since I had looked at it, and just to remind us, what's going on with Gideon, and who is this guy? Very interesting character. So on one hand, of course, this story is the same as all the other stories in the book of Judges, right? That we see that the children of Israel did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord, and what happened? And so the Lord delivered them into the hand of somebody, right? So this time, it's the hand of Midian, right? And for 7 years. Now, Midian is very interesting, right? Midian is not a Canaanite tribe. Midian is two things, I would say. Midian is is a tribe that lives outside of the land of Canaan. They live on the far side of the Jordan, right? And so when we talk about Midian, right, we're talking about a neighbor, but not a close neighbor. All right. So that's number one. Number two, Midian is also, right, and this will come up later in the book of Judges, Midian is also the Machatonim of Moses, right? This is Jethro, his father-in-law, right, was a Midian priest, right? And his wife, Tzipporah, was then, the daughter of a Midian priest, right? So a very important person in Midian. All right, so basically what would happen, right, is that the Israelites would sow, right, and then the Midianites and then the Amalekites as well. We always need the Amalekites to be, in cahoots with the enemies of the Israelites, right? They're the sort of classic constant enemy of the Israelites, right? So the Midians came, and what did they do? They would take all of the produce, right? And they would take all of the animals, right? And they came with their cattle and their tents and so on and so forth, right? And they came as locusts for multitude, right? They had so many people, right? And they had camels, right? Camels, which Israelites don't have, right? And it came to pass when the children of Israel cried unto the Lord because of Midian, that the Lord sent a prophet unto the children of Israel, and he said unto them, Thus saith the Lord, the God of Israel, I brought you up from Egypt and brought you forth out of the house of bondage, and I delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of all that oppressed you, and drove them out from before you, and gave you their land. And I said unto you, I am the Lord your God. Ye shall not fear the gods of the Amorites, in whose land ye dwell, but ye have not hearkened to my voice. Right? So this is the classic, again, the classic formulation. I delivered you, right? And you have betrayed me, right? You do not hearken to my voice. And so then the Malach, right? The angel of the Lord, the Malach, the messenger, came and sat under a terebinth, right? The same kind of tree that Abraham would sit under, right? And that was in Ophrah, that belonged unto Joash, the Abiezerite. And his son Gideon was beating out wheat in the winepress to hide it from the Midianites, right? This is what they had been reduced to hiding their yield so that the Midianites wouldn't steal it. And the angel of the Lord appeared unto him, right, and said unto him, The Lord is with thee, thou mighty man of valor, right? Which is almost funny, right? Because as we see Gideon through the rest of this chapter, we see that Gideon is far, far from a man of valor, right? He is actually very fearful. And the first thing he says, right? So Gibor HaChayil, right? Gibor HaChayil, that's the last little words here. You can see, I don't think you can see me circling them, so I'm
Where
sorry.
is that?
It's verse 12, the last two words of verse 12. Gibor Hechayo, right? He's really laying it on thick, shall we say? Okay, and what does Gideon say to them? Oh, my Lord, if the Lord be with us, then why has all this befallen us? And where are all his wondrous works, which our fathers told us of? Saying, did not the Lord bring us up from Egypt? But now the Lord hath cast us off and delivered us into the hands of the Midianites, right? And the Lord turned toward him and said, go in this thy might and save Israel from the hand of Midian. Have I not sent thee? Right? So he's like, do it already. You know, you're the judge, you're the leader, you're the guy that's going to save the day, right? And just like Moses before him, you know, these sort of echoes with Moses are very interesting, right? Because what does he say? Oh my Lord, wherewith shall I save Israel? Behold, my family is the poorest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my father's house, right? So as we mentioned last time, again and again, we have this trope, right, of the least of the sons being the eventual hero, right? And the Lord said unto him, surely I will be with thee, and thou shalt smite the Midianites as one man. And he said to him, so then we get the whole business of these signs, right? Gideon keeps on asking for signs, right? And God keeps on giving them the signs. And for whatever reason, right, whereas God got very impatient with Moses at times, right, and got angry at Moses for resisting, he never seems to get upset with Gideon. He just seems to understand that he is less of a formed person, so to speak. All right. So then what happens is Gideon built an altar there unto the Lord and called it Adonai Shalom, right? The name of God, peace, which is what God had said to him, right? And unto this day it is yet in Ophrah of the Abiezerites. And it came to pass that same night that the Lord said unto him, take thy father's bullock and the second bullock of 7 years old and throw down the altar of Baal that thy father hath, and cut down the Asherah that is by it, right? So we talked about this before, right? That the issue is the Israelites have taken over the Canaanite gods as their own. And this is why they are now enthralled to the Midianites, right? So here, Gideon shows some resolve. Then Gideon took 10 men of his servants and did as the Lord had spoken him. And it came to pass because he feared his father's household in the middle of the city, so that he could not do it by day, so he did it by night. So he showed some resolve. He wasn't willing to do it in the open. And when the men of the city arose early in the morning, behold, the altar of Baal was broken down, and the Asherah was cut down that was by it, and the second bullock was offered upon the altar that was built. Robert Alter points out that we never learn what happens to the first bullock. What's up with the first bullock? And he actually suggests that the bullock, the second bullock is actually not the second, it's actually the fat bullock. And that way there's only one bullock. And they said one unto the other, who hath done this thing? And when they inquired and asked, they said, Gideon, son of Joash, hath done this thing. And then the man of the city said unto Joash, bring out thy son that he may die, because he hath broken down the altar of Baal, and because he hath cut down the Asherah that was by it. And Joash said unto all that stood against him, will ye contend for Baal? You're going to fight for God, your God, right? Or will you? Or if you have to fight for your God, are you going to be able to save him? Right? He that will contend for him shall be put to death before morning. Because if he is a god, if Baal is a god, let him contend for himself. Because so if a person has broken down the altar, a god should be able to fix it his own self. And so that seems to convince everybody that there's that it's not appropriate to kill Gideon. And from that day on, he was called Yerubbaal, meaning he who will contend with Baal, Yerubbaal. Saying, let Baal contend against him because he hath broken down his altar. All right, so we see this pattern, right, that Gideon first sort of does the housekeeping within the Israelites, and now he's going to be able to turn his attention to the Midianites and the Amalekites, right? And so here the rest of this chapter, which we won't read in detail now, basically just says that the Midianites and the Amalekites and the other Easterners come in, right, and they begin to they develop a huge encampment, and then Gideon gathers all the warriors of Israel, right, and then Gideon has this sort of moment of he kind of loses heart, and he insists twice in a row that God give him some sort of sign, right, and this business of a fleece of wool on the threshing floor. So once the floor has to be wet, and I think that's the second time the floor has to be wet and the fleece has to be dry, but the first time the fleece has to be wet, but the floor has to be dry. And God performs these miracles for Gideon, and finally seems to convince him that everything is going to be okay. All right. So now let's turn. Any questions about the setup? Because that's the setup. Now we're going to get to the fight. The fight in the this very interesting battle that is about to happen. So any questions? I open the floor. And Phyllis and Jeannie, I see that you're muted. So if you want to say something, please do unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yep. Hi, Phyllis.
Hi. What part of the Jews does Gideon belong to? Is he an Israelite or Judite or what?
He is a Manassite, so he's an Israelite, right? He's from the tribe of Joseph. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, kind of a northerner, and it's actually interesting in chapter 8. Hopefully, we'll get there. We'll see that his brother tribe or brother half tribe, the Ephraimites, are upset with Gideon for a variety of reasons. So, but we'll get there, and we'll see if we can make sense of why they're upset. Yeah, go ahead, Connie. Connie, did you want to say something? Connie seems to be. Connie seems to be frozen. So, all right, Connie, if you unfreeze, feel free to. Oh, did we lose her? No, there she is. Oh, that's weird. Okay. All right. Well, let's continue with chapter 7. All right. All right, so then Yerubbaal, who is Gideon, and all the people that were with him rose up early and pitched beside En-Harod, and the camp of the Midianites was on the north side of them by Gilbeath Moreh in the valley. And the Lord said unto Gideon, the people that are with thee are too many for me to give the Midianites into their hand, lest Israel vaunt themselves against me, saying, mine own hand hath saved me. Right? Very interesting. Right? So Gideon has done too good of a job. Right? He's gathered too many warriors. And God explains why it's too many, right? That God wants all the glory for God's self. He doesn't want anyone to think that they did this work themselves. Right, which I find to be such an interesting dynamic. Right? So, if anyone wants to sort of offer any kind of preliminary reflections on this dynamic, I would love to hear it. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, it's obvious. It's not a very flattering picture of God. He's a diva.
Yeah.
A divo.
Yeah, I like actually diva better than divo, but that's really interesting that you say that it's not flattering, right? It's almost as though, he
has such an ego,
Right.
You have to give me credit. I
Right.
have to have the credit. It's not enough for me if you win. It has to be obvious. Everyone has to believe that you only won because of me, and you wouldn't win without me.
Right. And I think that, I think you're right. I think from our perspectives, if we look at God as a sort of a human-like character, right, that is not a very flattering portrait, right?
Can I offer another opinion?
I'm very open to another opinion.
Okay.
So before I reflect, yeah, Phyllis and then Suzanne.
Okay. I think this is a justification for what later happens.
Okay, meaning?
Meaning that, I don't know this, but I think that some of the Israelites probably desert the field or whatever. And so,
Okay. Interesting. Okay. And Suzanne, what's your take on it?
I actually have a different thing on verse 1.
Okay,
It
sure.
says, then Jerubbaal, who is Gideon. Does that mean that Jerubbaal is another name for Gideon?
It is. So it's actually really interesting. There's some disagreement among scholars. It seems to say in chapter 6, right, that Gideon gained the name Jerubbaal, right, when he took down the altar of Baal, right? He was the one who contended with Baal. But there's also a thought that he was Jerubbaal, and then later became Gideon. So it's a little bit confusing. But yes, he has two names, and which is really interesting. But of course, when we talk about Gideon in popular culture, right? He's Gideon. He's not Jerubbaal. There are plenty of Jewish Gideons. I don't know any Jewish Jerubbaals.
I don't know why not.
Yeah, I mean, it's such
I
a
don't know
pretty
why it
name.
didn't catch on as a name.
Yeah.
what does Gideon mean?
Gideon appears to mean something along the lines of cutting down, which that's why it makes sense that he would have gained that name after he cut down the altar. Yeah. So it's kind of it's an interesting scholarly question that's obviously way well above my pay grade in biblical studies, but it's certainly interesting when people have two names. Or three names. It's always an interesting question. Do they have two names because they have separate traditions that the biblical redactor didn't feel the need to try to harmonize? That doesn't seem to be the case here, right? Because the redactor clearly identifies Jerubbaal as Gideon. So if these are two separate strands, he has actually put them together. All right. So to continue, right? So we have this sort of idea, right? We have the idea from Phyllis that this is a justification for why some Israelites will desert later. We'll see if that happens. And Jeannie has the idea that this puts sort of God into a in a negative light. Now, this is very interesting because this is another echo with the Exodus, right? It's another where the insistence again and again in the book of Exodus, right, is that God will fight for the Israelites, that they don't have to do the fighting, right? And it really, and so it's all about the glory of God. And it is a really interesting question, right? That this is to sort of maximize God's reputation, right? To really be convincing that God is the most powerful, among all of the celestial beings, so to speak. Or God is actually a God and all the other gods are not gods, right? So I don't think that from a modern perspective, Jeannie, I would agree with you. From a biblical perspective, I think that they would say that this is really about magnifying the name of God. I'm not sure whom I agree with, you or them. But
it's the same, isn't it? But it's God doing it, making sure that his name is magnified in this case, isn't it?
Exactly. So let's see what this means, because
Can
I
I ask
think
a
it's really.
question?
Oh, please, David, go ahead. Yes, please.
What is the Hebrew, where it says the Lord in the translation, what is the Hebrew in original for the Lord?
Okay, so every time in this translation where it says Lord, this is like the JPS. So it was this way. This is the old JPS. New JPS is like this. The King James is like this. A lot of Bibles are like this, right? Whenever it says Lord in in all caps, that is the Yud He Vav He. That is the ineffable name of God, right? That is unpronounceable, right? Because it's all vowels, right? So, and so Adonai in Hebrew means Lord, and so that's what is rendered as a translation in standard editions of the Bible. Okay, so now what does God say? And now, therefore, make proclamation in the ears of the people, saying, whosoever is fearful and trembling, let him return and depart early from Mount Gilead. And there returned of the people 22,000, and there remained 10,000. All right, so they winnow out 2/3, right, of the people by allowing them to plead cowardice. Good way to get rid of people, right? Just let them go home. Okay. And the Lord said to Gideon, the people are yet too many. Bring them down unto the water, and I will try them for thee there. And it shall be that of whom I say to thee, this shall go with thee, the same shall go with thee. And of whomsoever I say unto thee, they shall not go with thee, the same shall not go. Right. So now we're going to have another tryout. Right. This one not a self-selecting tryout, but a different kind of tryout. Right. So he brought down the people unto the water, and the Lord said to Gideon, everyone that lappeth of the water with his tongue, as a dog lappeth, him shalt thou set by himself. Likewise, everyone that boweth down upon his knees to drink. And the number of them that lapped, putting their hand to their mouth, was 300 men. But the rest of the people bowed down upon their knees to drink water. And the Lord, sorry, everybody. There we go. And the Lord said to Gideon, by the 300 men that lapped will I save you, and deliver the Midianites into thy hand, and let all the people go, every man unto his place. Right? So we go ahead, Jeannie.
Dogs don't put their hand to their mouth when they're drinking water. It seems a strange distinction.
It really does seem very strange to me. It seems to me that the ones who would be on their knees, right, would be the ones that are like the dog.
They're saved by the wrong group, maybe.
Yeah, it's not really clear. But I do. But the thing to know, right, is that to be compared to a dog in the Bible is not a good thing. Dogs are not held in high esteem in the Bible.
Is that right? In Islam, God will not enter a house that has a dog in it. I didn't know the same is true in Judaism.
I don't think that's necessarily true, but there's definitely a what's the word I'm saying?
They're not the most exalted animals. Cats are held in higher esteem later.
Exactly. Yeah. So although there's a television program called Rami, which is about, or Rami rather, which is about a Muslim kid in New Jersey, and he takes up with a new imam who tells him that dogs are fine. It's actually really an interesting show if you have access to it. All right. So in any case, regardless of the question of who was on their knees and who lapped with their hands and which one was more like a dog, right? We are down to 300. So we've whittled ourselves down from 32,000 men, right, to 300 men, right? Which, as you'll see, doesn't seem like very good odds for the Israelites, right? Because the Midianites are as many as the Bible might put it, as many as the grains of sand on the sea. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Well, I just want to ask a bigger question. What kind of distinction is that to make?
What do you mean?
Well, the people that are going to lead you are going to be the people that drink water like a dog. Where does that come from? It's not the first thing that would pop into your mind as a criterion for who's going to make it.
It's not. It's not. And it's a very interesting question, and I think it would be a question that would be worth investigating a little bit more than I had time to do today, because it just seems so weird.
Yeah.
Okay, so according to rabbinic tradition, it says in this commentary, the lappers were chosen because unlike those who bent on their knees, they did not bow down to an idol.
Right.
All right, so the rabbis, right, will very often take things out of the immediate context, right, and sort of turn it a little bit. So that's their idea, right? According to Josephus, the lappers were cowards, right? So they were just cowards who were pretending not to be cowards, right? The first one was about whoever considers himself a coward go home, and now we have to actually uncover the cowards. So it's really not. So following this view, which is more likely, Gideon highlights the miracle of the victory by choosing cowards to be the ones who are going to save the people. Well, we'll see. All right, so let's see what happens. So they took the victuals of the people in their hand and their horns, right? So the people who the 9,300 or whatever it is, 9,700 that leave their provisions, right? And they leave their ram's horn. And they sent all the men of Israel, every man unto his tent, but retained the 300 men. And the camp of Midian was beneath him in the valley. And it came to pass the same night. Okay, so again, we're going to find ourselves here, right, in a situation where God seems to recognize that Gideon has some doubts about this stuff, right? That the Lord said unto him, arise, get down thee upon the camp, for I have delivered it into thy hand. But if you fear to go down with Purah, thy servant, down to the camp, right? So God seems to already be able to predict, right, that Gideon has some doubts about his capacity to do this. And thou shalt hear what they say, and afterward shall thy hand be strengthened to go down upon the camp. Then he went down with Purah his servant unto the outermost part of the armed men that were in the camp. Now the Midianites and the Amalekites and all the children of the east lay along in the valley like locusts for multitude, and their camels were without number as the sand which is upon the seashore for multitude. You can just sort of imagine, right, this idea of this huge enemy encampment, right? And 300 guys are going to stand up to it. And when Gideon was come, behold, there was a man telling a dream unto his fellow and saying, behold, I dreamed a dream, and lo, a cake of barley bread tumbled into the camp of Midian and came into the tent and smote it that it fell and turned it upside down, that the tent lay flat, right? So just a bizarre dream just in general, right? Why barley bread, right? And why is bread a tool of destruction? It's really not clear, at least to me. And his fellow answered and said, that is nothing else save the sword of Gideon, the son of Joash, a man of Israel. Into his hand God hath delivered Midian and all the hosts. Right? Why? Right? How does he know that? How is that clear to this guy? Right? It's not entirely clear why that would be the case. And it was so, when Gideon heard the telling of the dream and the interpretation thereof, that he worshipped, and he returned into the camp of Israel and said, arise, for Adonai hath delivered into your hand the host of Midian. Vaish tahu, right? He bowed down. That's what it says when he worshipped, right? Vaish tahu, right? He bowed down to God. Right? And he divided the 300 men into 3 companies, and he put into the hands of all of them horns and empty pitchers with torches within the pitchers. And now this is really interesting, right? Because he has been reduced to 300 warriors. And so the question for me is, now he seems to come up with this very clever a very clever strategy, right? And so the question is, did he come up with this himself, or was he following God's instructions? I really don't know the answer, right? So he divided the three and he said unto them, look on me and do likewise. And behold, when I come to the outermost part of the camp, and it shall be that as I do, so shall ye do. When I blow the horn, I and all that are with me, then blow ye horns also on every side of the camp, and say, for the Lord and for Gideon. Ladonai ul Gideon. Right? So basically, he's going to psych them out. Right? He's going to psych them out with noise, right? With noise and with light. So Gideon and the 100 men that were with him came unto the outermost part of the camp at the beginning of the middle watch, when they had but newly set the watch. And they blew the horns and broke in pieces the pitchers that were in their hands. And the three companies blew the horns and broke the pitchers and held the torches in their left hands, and their horns in the right hands wherewith to blow. And they cried, the sword for the Lord and for Gideon. So if they had a ram's horn in one hand and a torch in the other hand, where are their swords? One hand is holding the sword. Right?
What are they?
Yeah, go ahead, Suzanne.
What are they trying to do with all the horns and broken pitchers?
Yeah, it's really interesting. They basically, as far as I can tell, they sneak up on the camp, right? They sneak up on the camp with hiding the light in their pitchers, right? So that the Midianites will not see the light, and they have their horns in the other, right? And so to answer my own question, presumably their swords are hanging by their sides, right? They're not planning to use the swords right away, right? So they get down there, right? And they stood every man in his place around the camp, and all the host ran, and they shouted and fled, right? And they blew the 300 horns, and the Lord set every man's sword against his fellow, even throughout all the host. And the host fled as far as Beit Shittah towards Zererah, as far as the border of Abel Meholah by Tabath. Very interesting, right? So that in the end, the reason that there only needed to be 300 men was that the men of Israel in the initial attack on the camp didn't need their swords. All they needed was to sow confusion and panic, and the Midianites took care of themselves, right? They raised their swords up against one another, right? They're against their comrades. In their haste to flee, right? They ended up killing one another. David, do you want to say something?
No.
Okay. All right. And the men of Israel were gathered together out of Naphtali and out of Asher and out of all Manasseh, and pursued after Midian. All right. Very interesting, right? So these are all some of the northern tribes, right? One that is missing is Ephraim, right? So Ephraim, for some reason, is not called on. And Gideon sent messengers throughout all the hill country of Ephraim. So now he says it, right? Saying, come down against Midian and take before them the waters as far as Beit Barah and also the Jordan. So all the men of Ephraim were gathered together and took the waters as far as Beit Barah and also the Jordan. And they took the two princes of Midian, Orev and Zeev, and they slew them at the rock of Orev, or they threw Orev at the rock of Orev, and Zeev they slew at the winepress of Zeev, and pursued Midian. All right. So very interesting, right? That the first round of pursuit, right, is Naphtali and Asher and Manasseh, right? And only the second round is Ephraim, right? And this will lead, as I suggested, this will lead to trouble in the next chapter. All right. So the men of Ephraim said unto Gideon, why hast thou served us thus, that thou didst not call us when thou wentest to fight with Midian? And they did chide with him sharply, right? Concerned, right? Perhaps that Ephraim is the boss, right? Why is Gideon all of a sudden? He's the lowest clan and the lowest tribe. Why is he taking charge here, right? And he said unto them, and Alter makes a big deal of this, right? Saying that he's not only now sort of developed as a Gibor Hechail, right? As a valiant man, he's also becoming a very good orator, right? And he says, what have I now done in comparison with you, right? What I've done is nothing. You've done so much, right? Is not the gleaning of Ephraim better than the vintage of Abiezer, right? Which is to say that the random leftover wine grapes of Ephraim are superior to the best wine grapes that his clan has, right? And he says, God hath delivered into your hands the princes of Midian, Oreb and Ze'ev. And what was I able to do in comparison with you? And they are convinced, right? So he actually very cleverly allows them to capture the head guys, right? And so very interesting how he manages to do this politically. So we see, right, in Gideon, right, not just that he is a prophet from God, right, but he also is developing his own political skills, right? And these and people who have been learning the book of Samuel, in that group, know how keen the political sense of these writers is, right? So this is they're very, very clever, and very focused on how there are political dynamics among the various clans, right? And Gideon came to the Jordan and passed over, he and the 300 men that were with him, faint yet pursuing. And he said unto the men of Sukkot, give, I pray you, loaves of bread unto the people that follow me, for they are faint. And I am pursuing after Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian. So these other chieftains and the princes of Sukkot said, are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thy power, that we should give bread unto thine army? Wow. So why do you think the people in Sukkot refused to provision the 300 men? It's not a big army. Any ideas? Well, let's read on a little bit. Let's read on a little bit longer. We'll see if something comes up. And Gideon says, therefore, when the Lord hath delivered Zebah and Zalmunna into my hand, then I will tear your flesh with the thorns of the wilderness and with briars. And he went up thence. So it's a very violent threat, right? And he went up thence to Penuel, and he spoke unto them in like manner. And the men of Penuel answered him as the men of Sukkot had answered. Right? So it's not just the people of Sukkot who are unwilling to provision the men. And he spoke also unto the men of Penuel, saying, when I come back in peace, I will break down this tower, right? I will destroy your town when I get back from dealing with these Midianites. All right. So this, I find this to be very, very interesting and also disturbing, right? This idea that if you don't help us, then I'll destroy you when I come back from my mission. And so why would these men not provision the army? The only reason I can think of, right, is that they didn't believe that that Gideon was going to manage it, that it would not be worth their while, that his chances of success are so small, right, that it's not worth It's not worth making that investment. And this seems very strange to me, though, because there does seem to be in the book of Joshua, in the book of Judges, right? We just saw it here, right, where the non-Israelite peoples seem to have full information. There seems to be satellite technology going on, right? That the news seems to jump from place to place, right? The Midianites seem to know that they were going to be destroyed by Gideon before Gideon knew it, right? And we see this again and again. So how these folks did not know about what happened to the Midianites in the land of Canaan, I'm a little confused. It doesn't make sense to me. All right, so now Zebah and Zalmunna were in Karkor, and their hosts with them, about 15,000 men, all that were left of all the hosts of the children of the east, for there fell 120,000 men that drew sword. Right, so I'm assuming that these are the sort of typical biblical exaggerations, but even so, right, this idea, right, that 300 men could cause an army, right, of 135,000 men, right, to destroy itself, because that's basically what happened, right, to destroy itself and flee and be destroyed in rearguard action. And Gideon went up by the way of them that dwelt in tents on the east of Nobah and Yogbaha, and smote the host, for the host was secure. And Alter understands this as saying that the host thought that it was secure, right? The hosts assumed it had been secure, and that's why they were resting. And then Gideon goes in with 300 people and destroys the 15,000, not just 300 men, right? But 300 famished men, right? 300 men who hadn't eaten and didn't have provisions. All right. And Gideon, the son of Joash, returned from the battle from the ascent of Heres, and he caught a young man of the men of Sukkot and inquired of him. And that young man wrote down for him the princes of Sukkot and the elders thereof, 77 men. And he came unto them, the men of Sukkot, and said, Behold, Zebah and Zalmunna, concerning whom he did taunt me, saying, Are the hands of Zebah and Zalmunna now in thy power, that we should give bread unto your men that are weary? And he took the elders of the city and the thorns of the wilderness and briars, and with them he brought the men of Sukkot, and he broke. And so basically, it appears that he sort of tortures them with the briars and thorns, right? Presumably he kills them, right? And then he broke down the tower of Penuel and slew the men of that city. And he said unto Zebah and Zalmunna, Where are the men whom ye slew at Tabor? And they answered, As thou art, so were they, of one form with the children of the king. And he said, They were my brethren, the sons of my mother. As the Lord liveth, if ye had saved them alive, I would not slay you. And he said unto Jether, his firstborn, and I think this is also just a fascinating part of the story, horrifying but fascinating, right? And he said unto Jether, his firstborn, Up and slay them. But the youth, right, drew not his sword, for he feared, because he was yet a youth, right? Which is such an interesting it's such an interesting passage, because the word that is used here for youth, right, is the same word that's used throughout for lad, right? So so that just the fighting men are called na'arim. So here there's something in particular about this na'ar, right? Because he was afraid, right? Velo shalaf hana'ar charbo, right? He did not draw his sword, ki yareh, right? He was affrighted, or he was awed, right? Presumably, right, he was too afraid to actually kill a man, right? He's not yet a hardened warrior, the way his father has become, right? And so he refuses to do it, and there's this sort of moment of tension, right? And is he going to do it? Is he not going to do it? And then Zebah and Zalmunna said, rise thou, right? Gideon, you get up, right? And fall upon us. For as the man is, so is his strength. Ki cha'ish gevurato, right? This kid is not a man yet, right? He's not ready to do it. And Gideon arose and slew Zebah and Zalmunna and took the crescents that were on their camels' necks, right? These are some sort of insignia or decoration or. Go ahead, Suzanne.
I'm sorry, no.
Oh, okay. All right. So thoughts on all of this? Sort of a horrifying portion. I mean, there's many horrifying portions of the book of Judges, but this is one of them.
Why are Zebah and Zalmunna telling him to rise up against them? I don't get it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Why would Zalma, what's his name? Zebah and Zalmunna, why would they sort of say enough already, just kill us, right? It's a very interesting question, right? Maybe because they knew that they were going to be killed and they would rather get it over quickly rather than having it, sort of be dragged out. Maybe they're afraid that Yether would eventually build up enough courage to try to kill him, and would hit them with his sword but not succeed, right? Which would end up being sort of torture. I'm not really sure why.
Okay.
But I think what's really fascinating to me, right, is this, that we've sort of seen Gideon develop from this very, very tentative, very frightened person that God calls a Gibor Chayil before Gideon is done anything, and we sort of see how Gideon develops over the course of the story into this hardened warrior, and then at the very late stage of the story, right, we are given this image of Gideon's own son, right? And Gideon, as you will see later, Gideon will have many, many sons, and sort of putting an expectation on him that he himself is a Gibor Chayil, right? That he somehow, even though he's still a kid, is ready to be a ruthless warrior the way his father is. All right, so let's continue, right? Because I think that this is we now sort of remember I sort of said we started with Gideon being a little bit like Moses, and now we sort of see him being a little bit like Saul, right? So he's the great warrior, right? He saves Israel from the Midianites, and so the men of Israel said unto Gideon, "Rule thou over us, both thou and thy son, and thy son's son also, for thou hast saved us out of the hands of Midian." Right? So, we get in the book of Samuel, right, the sort of popular uprising, right? We want a king, right? Appoint for us a king, right? And so we can be like the other nations around us, right? And so we see here, yeah, go ahead, David.
Well, I was so curious as I was going through it. It seemed to me that it was a process of going through and reducing the number of men that would be sent to fight. And then that, in a way, was almost saying that would make it even more of a miracle.
Right. I think that's right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. And I think that, and so I think that that's one of the reasons, where we'll get this, right, is that, let me just read number 23, right? And Gideon said to them, "I will not rule over you, neither shall my son rule over you. The Lord shall rule over you."
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because Gideon has this understanding, which is very important, at least in the book of Judges, right? That Israel is not going to have a king, right? Israel will not have, Gideon has no desire to be a king, right? He's fine being a prophet, right? Because as a prophet or that kind of a leader, right, he can ensure that God is actually the ruler, right? As opposed to a human, right? And for the reason that David suggested, right, is that Gideon knows for a fact that that even with the support of God, right, a 300-man force is not going to do any damage against a 135,000-man force unless there's like a complete miracle, right? Right. And so Gideon says unto them, I would make a request of you, right, that ye would give me every man the earrings of his spoil. For they had golden earrings because they were Ishmaelites. Now this I'm confused, right? Because the men of Israel, right, said unto Gideon, right, be our king. But now it says that they're Ishmaelim, right? So this I also need to figure out. Are they Ishmaelites or are they Israelites? Right? And what's an Ishmaelite?
They're Abrahamites.
Ishmael.
Right. And they're related, and they're also related to the Midianites,
Abraham.
right? Because there's in the story of Joseph, right? There's Ishmaelites and there's Midianites who there's some confusion in the text about who actually takes Joseph out of the pit and who brings him to Egypt. So yeah, so a little bit confusing, right? All right. So this here says, so the substitution of Ishmaelites who were descendants of Hagar for Midianites who were descendants of Keturah also appears in the Joseph story. All right, so it's not right. So it's not entirely clear, right? How? Okay, I understand. So I get it. Okay, so the booty that the Israelites had taken from the Midianites and the Ishmaelites were golden earrings, right? They had taken those from the tribes that they had defeated, right? And so the Israelites say to them, okay, fine, we don't need these golden earrings. We'll give them to you, right? And they spread a garment and cast therein every man the earrings of his spoil. And the weight of the golden earrings that he requested was 1,700 shekels of gold, beside the crescents and the pendants and the purple raiment that was on the kings of Midian, and beside the chains that were on their camels' necks, right? We're talking about this amazingly huge spoil. And Gideon did what? And Gideon made an ephod, right? And the ephod out of the gold, right? And if an ephod, right, is the sort of the breastplate that the priests of Israel use. It's not really clear what it stands for here, right? And put it in a city, even in Ophrah, and all Israel went astray after it there, and it became a snare unto Gideon and to his house, right? So Gideon wants to sort of this seemed, and so Midian was subdued before the children of Israel, and they lifted their heads no more, and the land had rest for 40 days in the days of Gideon. All right, so I'm gonna stop there. Let's just talk about this, and then we'll pick up with the very last bit of chapter 8, because that is kind of the introduction to chapter 9 for next week, chapter 9 and 10. All right, so what's going on here? And just to sort of say, right, Vayiznu Chol Yisrael Acharav, right? This is verse 27, where it said, and all Israel went astray after it there, right? That is a euphemism. The direct translation would be, and all of Israel whored after it. Right? And so when the Israelites go whoring, what does that generally mean? Suzanne, if you're speaking, we can't hear you.
I'm sorry.
Oh.
No,
Oh, that's
I'm
okay.
just trying to figure it out.
You said it means what? They went what?
Whoring.
Whoring, H-O-A-R?
Whoring.
Okay, that's,
It's not a good thing.
It's not a good. Thank you, Phyllis.
Okay, Phyllis to the rescue.
It is a very, very bad thing, right? It is. It's this word yiznu, right? And we see it. We see it in the third paragraph of the Shema, right? That you should not whore after your eyes, right? It means basically that they are treating this golden thing like an idol, right?
That's
So
in 27?
that's in 27, right? 26 is the verse 26 is the thing about no, 27, right? He made the ephod out of all the gold, right? He made, right. So again, what an ephod is in this context is not entirely clear. Let's see if this I was looking at a different translation which said it wasn't clear what it is. An ephod, it's mentioned in various contexts. It's a means of inquiring of God, a priestly garment, as I mentioned. It seems that the reference here is to a statue intended to commemorate the deliverance, which over the course of time became an object of what? Of pagan adulation, right? And this commentator makes clear what I was going to suggest, right? Is that this seems to be in some ways resonant with the golden calf,
Oh, yeah.
right?
Yeah.
That there's something, and we'll see actually later on in the book of Judges, it's not even resonant with the golden calf, right? It's kind of it's a replay, so to speak, although I think it's chronologically a little complicated. But this is really interesting, right? That Gideon, like Aaron in this narrative of the golden calf, wants to make some sort of a substitute, right? Some sort of something to sort of mollify the desire of the people, right? To have something they can see, right? Something they can see. He doesn't want to be that, right? He doesn't want to be the king, right? Who would be kind of the visual representation of God in real life. He doesn't want to be deified, so to speak. So he says, let's use this other thing, right, to be something that they can see, and that will remind them of God, right? The problem with that, right, of course, is that the way that people go, right, is that we have a tendency to turn things into idols, right, into totems, so to speak. And so even as what we see here, right, is the way in which even in a time of peace, right, it says, in the land had rest 40 years in the days of Gideon, right, that even in those days of rest, right, the Israelites have a tendency to move back in the direction of paganism and idol worship. All right, so that's where we'll pick up next. Not next week. I think next week is the day before Thanksgiving, so I think we'll be focusing on Thanksgiving. Go ahead, Jeannie.
Where are we in time here? Like in relation to the story of David and Solomon?
Right. So we're several generations before that.
Okay.
Right. We're in generations between the Exodus from Egypt, right, and the immediate conquest of the land, which we learned about in the book of Joshua, and the book of Samuel, right, where which happens at the very end of this time of Judges, right, and Samuel himself, right, might be described as the last of the judges, right, just as Saul is the first of the kings. And so it's this intermediate time, right, which we mentioned at the very beginning of our discussion of this book, it's really fascinating, right, because in the book of Joshua, the people seem to be completely down, right, with all of God's rules. We don't hear about all this backsliding, right? As soon as we get to the book of Judges, right, things go, sort of consistently downhill, right? And the judges, need to push, like Sisyphus, they need to push the boulder up the hill until they get to the top, and then it rolls down again, right? So, and then, then we get our golden age in the time of David, which obviously, as we've seen in the book of David, is more complicated than that.
But then I have a big question. Again, I don't understand. Who are the judges again?
Okay, so the judges, right, they're called Shoftim, and that's the name of the book in Hebrew. So you can see this in Hebrew, Shoftim, Shoftim in transliteration, and judges is the traditional translation, but it's probably not the best translation. A better translation would be something like leader or chieftain.
Mhm.
And
Any
basically, go ahead, Phyllis.
Yes, I just wanted to know if we're going to meet next week on Monday night for the
Yes.
New Yorker article on David.
Actually, no. On Monday evening, it was only Connie and me who showed up. So we made the executive decision that we were going to postpone the discussion of the first two chapters of the Book of Kings. So I hope that you'll join us for that on Monday evening, and then the following week we'll do the New Yorker.
Good. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I wasn't able to come. I was not well enough to come. I'm sorry that I missed it. I didn't want to miss that last discussion.
Right. No, there were, as I said, very few people came over. The very few was me and Connie. We had a great conversation. It was a great treat. But we did decide to have Rachmanis on everyone, and that we would postpone it another week. Right. So again, if you'd like a copy of the New Yorker article, please let me know, and I will do my best to get it to you.
Next Wednesday at 4?
Next Wednesday is we close down next Wednesday at like 1 or 1:30. So there'll be no class on next Wednesday.
I have a question along with David's question. How did we start out with the translation judges for Shoftim? If it's so far off a translation, where does this? Why do we call them judges?
It comes from the King James, and I may have read at some point why they chose that, but I don't remember.
A lousy translation? Did it go from Hebrew to Greek?
Because most of the people who are called judges, as we see in the story of Gideon, right? Most of them don't do any judging.
Does anyone do any judging?
Yeah, I think Deborah does some judging, and since she's the first really prominent one of these Shoftim, that might be why they call it a judge, because according to the chapters about Deborah, she actually does sit under the tree, right?
Just to add a monkey wrench into this whole discussion, what does the Greek version have as a translation for?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, if it ended up going through Greek and was mistranslated that way.
Right. So it very well could have been that, right? It could remember that there's another layer there as well, right? That the King James was also, actually I don't know, but there was also the Latin. So I don't.
Yeah, the Latin, but the Latin came from the Greek.
Latin came from the Greek, so it's like remember that these things are like a game of telephone.
Yeah.
Right. So, you never. So I'm sure that there is scholarly information about that, and so we could probably figure that out.
Yeah.
But I don't know the answer off the top of my head. But it's a fascinating question. But that's just the traditional designation for this book, and it's sort of like you could find better translations for many of the books from the Hebrew, but since they were translated from the Greek and from the Latin into English, it's hard to change them now.
Right, yeah.
All right, everyone. Thank you for staying over time. We're 15 minutes over. I apologize.
Thank you for staying over time.
All right.
Enjoy your dinner.
Have a good dinner, and I hope I'll see you very soon.
David, can you stay on for a minute?
Yes.
David?
Yeah. Oh, David, yeah.
David.
Oh, yeah. Hi. Oh, hi.
I have a book that you might be interested in, David, that you could borrow.
Okay.
it's a book of commentary about Joshua and the judges, and it has interesting information, introduction about the book of Judges.
Oh, okay.
I could hang it on my door if you want.
Okay, what's the number?
5H.
5H?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'll do it
5H.
now. 5H, okay?
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you, Rabbi. Bye.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you, Connie.
Okay, I'll hang it on now.
Okay.